Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Robert Nelson. I use he, him pronouns. I'm with Pivotal New Mexico, and welcome to our last installment of New Mexico Recovers. We really appreciate everyone sticking with us and your patience for getting this one set up. We have some very special guests and special friends with us from the National Institute of Flamenco. We'll get to Sarah and Marisol here soon. But, just so for folks know, like this call is being recorded. And it will be available on our YouTube channel. I'll make sure to link that here in the chat. I see some very familiar faces. As you're jumping onto the Zoom room today, please introduce yourself in the chat, your name, your organization, your pronouns, and then what you're hoping to get from today too, because I know like today we're talking about budget mapping and narrative development, which is a very important topic when we're talking about federal funding, especially. And for those who've never done that like budget narrative kind of stuff, it's good to kind of know. Before we get going though, I'm going to do like a little poll for folks and just take a couple minutes because this is our last one and we would like to collect some data so we can actually report from our own program side how we've been doing with this. So if you could take a couple minutes just to dig into this poll that we're launching right now, and I'll read the questions along with you. So this is our closing poll for April 2022. There are 4 questions. And as people are joining us, the first question is how do you use what you learn in these sessions, if at all? So check all that applies. So there's use general information. I know I switched those words up, but it's for meant to say use for general information, especially. Watch session recordings or presentations after the sessions, looked up additional information, shared with colleagues, changed grant writing practices. I see someone's written that they've changed their program practices, which is awesome. The second question is, these are multiple choice. So, and then the last 2 are not, they're actually short answer. The second question is, which of these areas did you make changes to because of what you learned during this series? Searching for grants is one of those, writing compelling grant narratives. These kind of follow like what our subject matter was all throughout. So budgeting, evaluation, partnership development, learning about SAM, UEI, and DUNS, all that good stuff right there. Our third question is briefly describe what was most helpful from these sessions. I know it says long answer. You don't have to write a novel, just keep it short. There's like, I think a 200 character limit on that one anyway, so you can't write a novel there. And our last question, what suggestions or topics do you have for future trainings? There we go. I'm so sorry about that, folks. Oh my gosh. Boom. So yes. Take the time, take a few minutes. I apologize for like the technical difficulties. We'll make sure that people know, like, oh my gosh, don't log into our Zoom account. And just to reiterate what the questions are, yes, thank you, Linda. I appreciate that. That would be super helpful. The first question is, how did you use what you learned in these sessions, if at all? Check all that apply. The second question is, which of these areas did you make changes to because of what you learned in this series? And then the third question and fourth question are both kind of short answer. Briefly describe what was most helpful from these sessions. And the fourth question is, what suggestions or topics do you have for future trainings? Because training is our bread and butter. So we hope for some new ones as we can. And I know we have a lot of things going on, especially. So good to hear from folks. And we'll keep this open for about a minute. It looks like there are about 421 folks have rejoined. I, again, apologize profusely for that. Oh my gosh, this is what happens in a Zoom world, right? But yeah, looks like I'm just looking through some of the results so far. So that first question looks like 33% or 30% of folks used for general information on that first question. 43% changed their grant writing practices. Wow, okay, that's awesome. And we'll make sure that once we end the poll, we'll share the results here in just a second. But I'm just giving you all some like real-time feedback once we get it. Which of these areas did you make changes to because of what you learned in this series? Most people, 44% of respondents say they changed to how they search for grants. And how they wrote compelling grant proposals, that's awesome. That's good to know. I will tell Allie, especially around that, because I know she was the one that did that. Thanks to everyone who is also introducing themselves in the chat too. So please introduce yourself in the chat, name, organization, pronouns, what you're hoping to get from today too. That's also really helpful as well. I know I see some familiar faces in the Zoom room today. Thanks for joining us. And also just thanks for joining this entire series. So this has been really great, just to have folks here. Looks like we have about 52% of participants who've taken the survey. We'll wait like a few more, like maybe a minute or so for folks. That'd be really great. In the meantime, as this chat or as this poll is still going, we'll do some quick kind of housekeeping. So as we are doing the presentation today, like if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. We'll make sure that we may be able to lift them up during the presentation as we're going. But know that like we'll break for like Q&A pretty much like 20 minutes before the hour is over. So folks have a chance to talk with Sarah and with Marisol, especially just to answer any like clarifying questions or anything like that. And and hopefully just have a conversation today. And also, we want to big thanks to the Kellogg Foundation for sponsoring the New Mexico Recover series. This is the very last one, but you can always relive your New Mexico Recover series always on our YouTube channel. I'll make sure to drop that here in the chat here in just a second. And let me see. What else did I want to add? And if you don't know anything about Pivotal New Mexico, you can always visit our website at www.pivotalnm.org. We are planning for some more events for next month and the months following, obviously. But if you haven't signed up for our email newsletter, I know Linda's in the Zoom room today. Thanks to Linda for sending all of our wonderful email newsletters. So reminding people of this event and many of our other events. So you want to subscribe, make sure that you subscribe to our email because that's the primary method by which we let folks know what's going on in the pivotal realm, on the pivotal world, so to speak. And I will ask folks I know we have about 13 people out of 25 in the room who've answered the poll. Just wrap up your answers. We'll do like the Jeopardy kind of like, countdown 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. We will end this poll. Looks like awesome. I know, folks, if you're just entering your stuff, we'll give you like maybe a couple more seconds, then we're just going to end it right now. Yeah, so we're going to share the results really quick. So looks like for us, like, a lot of folks really use these sessions for general information. That's really great. A third of y'all like changed your grant writing practices, that's super. We really appreciate that. For those that answered this question, change grant writing practices in the chat. Like if you could list an example that you'd want to share with this group. What are some practices that you changed specifically you can share in the chat? And the second question, which of these areas did you make changes to because of what you learned? A lot of folks changed their grant seeking practices. That's awesome. And then a lot of folks also changed how they wrote compelling grant narratives. So that's really cool too. And I mentioned, I'll tell Allie that she'd be really happy to know that particular result, as she's done a lot of our trainings, is kind of retired from our training of folks for Pivotal, but we do miss her. And I know she would be really happy to see these because data. And then let's see, I don't think we can actually view like the long form answers. So I'll make sure to share those. I know you can it links back to our like Zoom admin. So we'll share those later, but I just wanted to say, thank you so much for taking that poll. And if you could just give a really warm Zoom welcome for our guests today, Sarah Gonzales and Marisol Encinias over at the National Institute of Flamenco. Just to note, so Sarah went through our Talent Academy, was in our first Talent Academy cohort years and years ago, and she's number one. That's right. And I just have to say, like from our perspective, running the Talent Academy program and doing grant writing training, like to see what's happened at NIF in the last few years, how much they've grown, and they were growing before us. So we're really happy to have both Marisol and Sarah here today. So thank you both for doing this, and welcome.
Thank you so much for having us, Robert. We really appreciate it. I'm going to try to share my screen here, so hold on with me. Hold on. Can we see? Okay, excellent. Okay, we're mapping the course. Just a brief introduction of who we are. What are we talking about here? My name is Sarah Gonzales, and I have been writing grants for the National Institute of Flamenco for the past decade. And I'm a very proud graduate of the Talent Academy. And joining us today is our executive director, Marisol Encinias. Who are you?
Well, as Sarah said, my name is Marisol Encinias, and I am the current executive director of the National Institute of Flamenco. I'm also the daughter of the founding director of the National Institute of Flamenco. And I have been a dancer, um, educator, dance educator, arts educator, performer, choreographer. I'm also on the faculty at the University of New Mexico in the Department of Theater and Dance my whole life. And in 2019, I decided, okay, it's my turn to serve as executive director of the National Institute of Flamenco. And so my experience and my connection to the Institute is one of having grown up next to the programming, along with the programming, and additionally served as an artist in the programming, and now serving as kind of a leader and director of the mission, and working with a team of leaders, but definitely being kind of spearheading the initiatives of our organization. I'll say real quick as a kind of background of the National Institute of Flamenco. My family, it was a family founded arts organization based in Albuquerque, New Mexico, 501c3, was incorporated in 1982 by my mother, Eva
April,
Encinias,
40 years ago.
40 years
April.
ago.
Happy anniversary.
I always say that date seems a little arbitrary because my family's been doing, my grandmother had a dance school in Albuquerque, New Mexico from the 1950s, beginning in the 1950s. And she was doing the same work that I'm doing right now. And it's actually kind of funny when I look back and like I see flyers that my grandmother was putting out, like about her flamenco classes and and performances that she had going on, and kind of always part of the mission. We say, you know, we value artistic excellence. We value creating things that are beautiful in our community, training for artists, economic opportunities, job creation, and we also value community impact, impacting people's lives through the art, through arts education, through arts experiences, through the impact that the arts can have on community. And so that has always been part of the work for back from when my grandmother's studio in the 1950s. And then when my mother incorporated the Institute in 1982, and then today to what we still do today in the work of the Institute now. And this is, you can see here on the slide, we have primary programs that this summer we'll be presenting our 35th anniversary, 35th edition of Festival Flamenco Albuquerque, which is the largest flamenco festival that takes place outside of Spain. We will have 58 artists that we're bringing in from Spain and around the United States to perform and teach. And we have about another 40 artists that are here New Mexico based. So it's over 100 artists that participate in this festival. We have a professional company of dancers and musicians called Hijastros, who make their living as professional artists in this dance company. They present two main stage per theater performances throughout the year, and they also work in tablao, in kind of informal, less formal, not theatrical, but less formal performance venues 3 to 4 nights every week. On top of that, we have a school, a year-round school called the Conservatory of Flamenco Arts, where we do after-school programming, outreach programming, and year-round music and dance training for and programming for kids ages 3 to 85. And then
At
we
least.
also have at least, and then we have we also work in partnership with the charter school, Tierra Dentro of New Mexico, as well as partnership with the private sector, Hotel Albuquerque, for our Tablao Flamenco Albuquerque and in Santa Fe. And then we also have connections through the University of New Mexico partnership in higher education. So that's the Institute, and that's what I do at the Institute.
Great. We do want to say a special thank you to Pivotal New Mexico for letting us be part of this hashtag NM Recovers series, which has been excellent. And we are just grateful to be able to work alongside all of you who are doing great work in New Mexico as we all recover from this pandemic, which I just have to say is not over. So, so I just think it's just a wonderful series. And what a time we are living in. As an arts nonprofit, the National Institute of Flamenco has been awarded federal grants from the NEA, the National Endowment for the Arts, as well as the SBA, the Small Business Administration. But given that our mapping the course is centering around budget and narrative development, we're really going to focus on our NEA funded programs, including Festival Flamenco Albuquerque, Hijastros, the Conservatory of Flamenco Arts in our work today. As a team, that's how we work on our grants at the Institute. It is not just a one person does everything sort of thing. We have folks who are really good at editing. We have folks who are fantastic at knowing the numbers. Marisol knows those numbers back and forth. We have people who crunch those numbers, people who compile information, people who put those applications together. So I think our first thought is that you need to assemble your Avengers whenever you're going after one of these federal grants and figure out where everyone's strong suits are, and so that you can work as that team to put together the most competitive application that you can think of. So that's our first big old tip. And then Marisol was like, man, number one, you got to know your program. Look at the exclamation on that. Marisol, you have to know your program?
Yeah, so I guess I will speak a little bit about budget mapping
Yeah.
and knowing your program. So I feel like, yeah, my experience in grant writing and in being part of a team is that I can provide programmatic expertise as far as very much knowing the program. And in some cases, I understand that for different organizations that may be working with people from different departments within an organization, as far as Sarah said, working as a team and having everybody really at the table to provide the information that is needed to be able to really be able to flesh out budgets. So I will just speak, I guess, if this if this works for everybody, I will speak about my process in working on writing for the NEA or SBA. And we've, when we've received NEA, that's both NEA Cares, NEA, the ARPA,
And
American Rescue,
Artworks now grants for arts.
and artworks as well. And so I'll speak primarily maybe on artworks because that's a kind of regular, not a specific relief grant, is having basically budgetary budgets that we can pull on from year to year and have a really clear idea about how we're building the trajectory of, even though the reviewers of each grant are different from year to year, being very kind of convinced in your the budget really sets up everything for the narrative. So understanding how what you're budgeting is going to influence how you speak about your narrative, and knowing what it's going to cost you to be able to do the visionary work that you're planning on doing and what you're trying to compel people to fund. And so for me, for the festival, it's having, really being really in tune with all of the numbers, so that way it kind of provides a framework for the story later on. Knowing the numbers and not only artist costs or other incidental costs, travel costs, all of these things in specific for like what the work that we do in our festival or whatever type of programming, what are all of the other related costs, so that way you can get a true picture of what the program that you're writing for is going to cost, what kind of support you're truly going to be able to get, so that from there you can use those numbers to provide a framework for a strong narrative.
Yeah. I think, I mean, if we've gotten to this place where we're writing the grant and we're starting to think about the budget and we're thinking about the budget first, and we're thinking about the goals for the project. We're trying to think, what is this project really going to try to achieve? What can I actually do, and how much money do I really need to do it well? Right? What are the goals of the organization? What kind of money do we need to support? And then what are the goals of the federal funding agency, right? The National Endowment for the Arts is all about artistic excellence. They're all about artistic merit, right? And so if these are the goals of the federal funding agency, how is that project that you're thinking about, how is that aligned with their goals? And so if you're already writing this and you've assembled your team and you've made sure you have all of your federal all of your certifications in place and you're ready to go, right? So the question becomes, what are you doing, right? What are your goals? What are you going to achieve with that project, right? What do you want to accomplish? And you write those goals down, because by the end of the time that you finish this grant, it's probably a good check to see, are you still on track? Have you still aligned everything you've written with those original goals? And when you are doing your budget first, that will make sure that you are consistent throughout your proposal, right? This is going to lay down your specific request in front of your funder and make sure that they understand what you're really asking for. You're telling the same story with your budget as you are with your narrative, as you are with your budget narrative, right? Everything is in alignment. And so this is why we argue that, chicken or egg, which comes first? We argue that you really do need to know what you're asking for, and what you're asking for, is it realistic? Fortunately for us, we have done this festival almost 35 times. And so we have 35 years of experience putting this together. Look at Marisol, she looks tired, right? In addition to all the other work that we've done for the past 40 years. So we have a lot of background. Marisol knows exactly how much it's going to cost to put on this festival. And so if we're thinking about it, right? How much do we need to do it with that artistic excellence and with that artistic merit that is requested and required by the funder? Right?
And I think
Marisol?
that one of the things that I think that I would add to that is that I feel like when you're creating your budget, it's also a good time for you to be assessing the strengths and weaknesses of your program. If this is
Mhm.
possibly like, if you've maybe written already this grant before, you're tweaking this grant maybe for another grant application, or you're writing to the same funder, is having an opportunity to really assess, okay, this is what's strong, and this is what needs some strengthening in the program. And really speaking, like Sarah said, to the NEA, what the NEA cares about is artistic excellence and artistic merit, as she said. So how does your program reflect artistic merit? And what are you doing all that you really want to do in your program, and are you able to, how does working that into thinking about that as you're building your budget, and how you would probably could potentially shift some resources, and in order to be able to make the program really all that you want it to be, and then taking those numbers into the narrative.
Yeah. At the end of the day, a budget is really, it's how much money do you have? Where does it need to go? And how much, if any, is going to be left over? And if some of us have our gifts in some areas and some of us don't have gifts in those areas. And so if numbers are like, that's not me, that's not my area of strength, right? Work with your financial manager, your bookkeeper, your person who really does know those, to make sure that it's aligned with the programming that you are surely experts in your areas, right?
And I would just add to that where I think that, like numbers are kind of pretty, cut and dry. They tell the story of what it is that you're thinking. But I think of really tying number crunching with being visionary, but not like out on like not realistic. So allowing for creativity, how are your numbers and this kind of stuff. I feel like, funders want to be inspired also by what it is that you're talking about, and making sure that that it's not so cut and dry that it's not exciting,
Right.
and so being able, I feel like that's something that that is important.
Absolutely. And then you do your best. We start with income typically, right? You estimate that income, like the earned income, the contributed. But we have that history to base our income off of. You can do your best with your estimates. Just don't forget about your in kind, right? Like it's really important to demonstrate how your community is invested in what you're doing and what sort of partnerships you have, right? In our festival NEA grant, right, we're showing our in-kind space usage at the National Hispanic Cultural Center as well as at the University of New Mexico main campus, as well as volunteer time that it takes in order for this event to actually be at the level of artistic merit and excellence that it is. So that's incredibly important, right? And then go for your expenses. Sometimes we have struggled with this in the past. Sometimes we forget to pay ourselves as artists. And so this is something we have learned from. Once you've done all of your expenses and how much you think it's going to cost to truly put together your project, keeping your goals in mind, have you paid yourself? Is a question to be able to ask. And are your expenses less than or equal to your total income? And if your income is not enough, how can you reduce those expenses, right? How can you be cost effective? The value of a dollar, and we all understand it in this time and age. It changes on a day-to-day basis based on what's going on. But the real question becomes, how can you as a nonprofit organization be a good steward of taxpayer money? How can you use those federal dollars and invest them in a way that's going to be impactful in the community? And I can tell you from the NEA's perspective, they're not necessarily interested in you cutting corners and not having an excellent product at the end of it. It's important that you are maintaining quality and standards and thinking about the true cost of delivering the project with your goals and their goals in mind. Marisol, do you have any other thoughts?
No, just that I've also had an opportunity in to serve on panels, on review panels for the NEA in different capacities, and so I've been lucky enough to do that, and it really has given me good insight as to reading other people's grants and having an idea of how people, how important budget and narrative are, and really listening to other reviewers and knowing the people that are reviewing these grants are people that work in the industry, you know, and so they understand um, if what you're talking about seems reasonable, and if it's a good use of funding for the NEA that really meets the goals of the funder. So I think that, having that, keeping in mind that who you're talking to, who's your audience,
Mm.
as far as who's going to be reading, and really being able to convey to them the importance of the work that you're doing.
And that brings to light an opportunity that is open. I mean, they're always looking for reviewers out there. So if you're like, I don't know how a reviewer would think, see if there's an opportunity for you to take that on. If you have the time and capacity and everything else that we all have going on in all of our lives, do you have the time and capacity to be a reviewer for some federal grants and to get that experience? It'll help you. You'll learn a lot. Marisol has learned a lot in those experiences. Very valuable, and they're very informative to the way that we talk about our work and our budgets as well. So this goes into, so there's budget mapping, and then there's budget narrative, and then there's overall narrative. And all of these things, your budget, your narrative, your budget narrative, they all need to tell the same story. It gets very confusing if they're not linked and they're not centralized in your general argument, so to speak, in your general proposal of what you're going to be able to complete. So it goes back to knowing your program, knowing those goals, knowing the size and scope of what you're proposing. We have done $100,000 festivals before, but now we're doing closer to a $700,000 festival. That is not the same beast of an event to put on every single year. So keep that in mind as you start to develop your narrative. Follow instructions as closely as possible. This is especially for those federal funders. They are probably looking for reasons not to look at your grants. So don't give them any reasons. Make sure you are following those instructions and answering those questions, everything that's already been said in this New Mexico Recovers series. Be very clear and effective with your language. Make sure you are saying what you are truly meaning to say. Define your terms. We all work in very specialized industries. We all have our own jargon. We all have our own vocabulary and lingo that is very specific to us. So the question becomes, how can you explain your work to someone who might be outside of New Mexico, who might have never seen, for us, might have never seen flamenco before in their entire lives? How do you explain your work to that? To someone like that, right? For instance, like a tablao, for instance, has everybody been to a tablao? I don't know. Give an Ole in the chat if you've ever been to a tablao before. And if you haven't ever gone to a tablao, we have one in Santa Fe at El Ferrol restaurant every single weekend. And we've got Tablao Flamenco Albuquerque at Hotel Albuquerque. You'll really enjoy it, right? A tablao is an intimate venue for flamenco performance. And it's characterized by improvisation between all of the artists, right? But if we didn't explain that, we don't know if our audience is really going to be able to understand what we're talking about when we're writing. This is what Marisol is saying, right? So ask the question, can someone outside of my organization understand what I'm saying, what I'm talking about, right? Can people even understand what we're asking money for? And does it make sense? That budget narrative, that sometimes called a budget justification, it's essential. It's an essential part of your applications. Tell the government exactly how those taxpayer dollars are going to be invested and how they're going to be a good investment, right? An important investment. And cross the T's and dot your I's. Yeah, reread everything that you have written until your I's are crossed, and then find a friend and then have them reread everything that you have written, because you know that those federal reviewers will be doing that. Marisol.
Maybe find your friend that is the biggest naysayer friend that you have, so that way, and see if they're inspired by what it is that you're proposing. If the work seems meaningful. One of the things that I was just going to add, like before this call, Sarah and I were speaking with Robert about, this presentation. He was telling us that one of the sessions that Pivotal presented was on attachments, and I was like, oh my goodness, yes, because also in the attachment is your opportunity, that also the attachments of a grant, like that's the work that is also inspirational, that shows, for in arts organizations, what we have there, our attachments are usually collateral material that is, it has to be beautiful. Because what you're talking about very pragmatic. These are like, I need this much money to do exactly this much work, and this is how many people are going to get paid, and this is how many people are going to be impacted by it. And it has to be very specific. But at the same time, your collateral information is representing the work, and that it has to be attractive and beautiful to see. And so I think just like say, okay, this is a representation of what it is that I'm putting my money, that these funds are going to go towards. And the other thing for us is work samples. In the arts area, as far as like, okay, do these work samples truly represent artistic excellence and artistic merit? And how are you representing that? So video samples, music samples, and that they can see from there how what we're talking about as far as the funding that we need, how we're going to spend the money, and the narrative that we've just developed really truly supports these attachments.
Yeah. Okay, so you did it. You wrote everything. It's all done. You're so excited. You're having a little party, but then you're like, should I hit the submit button? Go back to those goals. Are they still there? And specifically in your budget narrative, have you made a clear connection between your budget and the program's goals and objectives? Ask that question. Maybe yes, maybe no, and then you just hit submit, and then you got to wait, right? Because it's a federal grant. So we submit typically, and we wait months and months and months and months and months and months and months before we hear anything. So patience is quite important, and feedback is quite important. So any sorts of odds and ends? Marisol already said the reviewing is excellent. If you have an opportunity to review federal grants, we highly recommend that. We also have a good luck candle that we light in our office when we are sending things off. And so whatever you have that works for you, that is wonderful. So I think that is about it. Oh, just a little plug. If you are like, oh, I'm not sure about this tableau, this intimate tableau, we do have Hijastros performing this weekend at the National Hispanic Cultural Center, along with the Orchestra of New Spain, this Friday night and Saturday afternoon. And then, as Marisol very correctly said, we are celebrating our 35th annual Festival Flamenco Albuquerque this June. Mark your calendars now, June 11th through 18th. This is an incredible celebration of flamenco. There'll be a lecture series on flamenco in New Mexico that we're all very excited about. There are performances, there are many, many things going on. There are workshops, classes. We would love to have you join us if you're interested. So I think we open it up for questions. What do you say?
That sounds like a good idea. So yeah, I saw some. I know I saw a question in the chat. So how? I know this is from Amber. How does one get involved to become a reviewer for federal grants? Depends on which department is one. So I left in the chat like so. AmeriCorps often takes grant review panelists, and you can contact Sam. I left Sam's email there in the chat. I also know like there are some different funders that do grant review panels too. So like the state New Mexico Arts does grant reviewer panels. I just sat on that review panel in March and April. So and they also pay a stipend. So I don't think America pays a stipend. So, but if you ever want like, to be paid for or compensated like for reviewing grants, New Mexico Arts, and I can leave Lily's email in the chat too. They usually just do it for their grant cycle. I believe it closes in December, and then they do the review process like I believe in March and April. So it only happens once a year. So, and yes, Tanya, United Way of Central New Mexico does panels. So do the community foundations. Albuquerque Community Foundation's panel is very similar to United Way. You can always contact the community foundation and ask. And in fact, Marisa Magallanes used to be over at the National Institute of Flamenco a long time ago. She's a really great friend of ours, and I know of NIF. So, but yes, if you have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself or leave them in the chat, and we'll make sure that we'll get that going.
And I can add that the National Endowment for the Arts, there's a page you can go to, and they specifically are asking for reviewers, so they have a way to get in contact with them. That's for us, but I would assume other federal agencies as well.
And I think that NEH is the same. And I was going to say that the other thing is the first panel that I served on as a reviewer wasn't for NEA. It was for another arts panel. It was for Mid-Atlantic and US Artists International. And so, I mean, that experience as well is really great to be able to sit on a panel with other reviewers and see what speaks to people and how narrative comes across.
Well, I do have a question for y'all. Like over the years, I know like you've probably found like the secret in the sauce for yourselves in terms of your budget narratives, how to match your budget to the work you're doing. But like, could you talk a little bit about some of like your own like challenges to creating that? But I know for arts organizations, it's like, oh man, why don't you just give us the money? But like, because it's hard to like measure with money, like the work that you do, like the work that folks are doing to create. Like, so could you talk a little bit about like any challenges that you faced around that, especially codifying that in budget?
Mm, challenges that we faced regarding, you know, I feel like at the Institute, we're pretty fortunate because of the longevity of the organization. So with the longevity, we have kind of what we feel is like, you know, a track record that can support the kind of what we're talking about as far as budgets, you know, the numbers that we're talking about, the number of people that we're going to be impacting. I think that a challenge for our organization always, I think for a lot of arts nonprofits, is being able to have the capacity to really gather data and use data as, you know, having enough just like capacity, manpower to be able to use data in a compelling way. So I think that, you know, I would say that for me, that's a frustration and a challenge that I find. But I think that, you know, we're definitely not where we want to be on our grant writing as far as, and we want to be able to get more federal grants, more, because our dream is that everybody does flamenco everywhere. And so, but
Everywhere.
we see, you know, being able to have the capacity to be able to um, pull more data, I think, to be able to be more compelling in that still.
I do think though I mean we have a good process. You have to get your rhythm down. Like what is your rhythm for your crew? And I mean in our crew we have Marisol who has that big overview picture view of what needs to happen in the whole organization as well as what needs to happen in the programs, right? You've got to have that big picture person. We have Jerry Kinney, who is our finance director, who is crazy with those numbers and can make sure that everything is exactly where it needs to be. She's the one who's making sure that we're not crossing funds from SVOG into NEA, into all the other recovery that we're going on. Like Jerry's incredible. We have Annie, who is a crazy, crazy copy editor and has a doctorate, like is brilliant. And I am like I'm gonna make this stuff happen. I'm gonna push you to make this go. And we have another person, Jules, who's like on it as far as like if we need letters or we need those attachments or whatever, like Jules is on it. And so it's like it really is part of like creating that team that's gonna make you successful in being able to get that idea across in that proposal. And that's where I know my strengths are not where Jerry's are, and I know Marisol has strengths that I don't have, but I can support them, and that's how we can work as a really good team to get those applications out because those are all beasts. Every single federal grant is a beast. They don't like just give out federal money easily. It's gonna take some time and some perseverance. But Marisol's absolutely right. And I have a question from Victoria in the chat. Victoria Archuleta is asking, what are some best practices or guidance for tracking volunteer hours and in kind? And again, that comes down to having the manpower, having somebody there who is able to track those volunteer hours, right, Marisol?
Yeah, well, I wish I could say that I have a more sophisticated process of tracking volunteer hours, but truthfully, it's spreadsheets, Excel forms,
We
and
love
you know,
Excel.
just kind of having I think what Sarah is saying as well is the teamwork. I think that has been a challenge for, like, I'm going to speak honestly about our organization in the past, is really having a well developed enough of a team to be able to really allow everybody to do the work that is going to be able to make you push forward and be more successful, in that you can all so differentiating of roles, and whoever that person is that's responsible for making sure that you are keeping track of volunteer hours, just contact information, data, that kind of stuff.
For sure. And we also keep everything as far as the in-kind goes. For instance, for our festival this year, we have space donated by the city of Albuquerque, and part of getting that contract done is getting the waiver that says that this space is worth this much, and we are not going to charge you for the space. And then we collect everything. You don't ever delete anything ever. And so then you start to compile it in that sort of way, right? And then we have year to year, talking with the National Hispanic Cultural Center, talking with UNM, and figuring out the true value of how many performances, Marisol, like 28 performances and 40 workshops, and how much is that space really worth over a whole week-long festival? It used to be a week, I'm sorry, now it's like 20 days. No, it's 9 days. Uh, yeah, how much is that worth really? Yeah.
And
Ooh.
just follow question. So how do you all calculate the value of a volunteer hour?
Right now, what we're doing with our volunteer hours, we calculated at $15 an hour. Depending if it's specialized, if it's more specialized, if it's like more, if somebody is in a very specialized position, like maybe there's people that are, in technical theater, and they're going to be offering to do some work for us, well, on a volunteer basis, then it would depend. But, we, for other kind of grassrootsy type work, putting on a festival requires just like many hands, sometimes taking attendance, sometimes doing, running to the store,
Driving,
doing,
putting the
doing things like
floors
that.
down.
Yeah. So we have kind of a rate that we've established over the years for different jobs, and just tracking that. And then at the same time, making sure that we're being careful to keep that up during heavy periods of time, so that we can accurately track volunteer time.
I just invite anyone else in the Zoom room today, if they'd like to unmute to ask any questions or have any comments, you're welcome to do so. I know I saw someone asked like where the videos are, but I know I posted these in the chat too, but I'll post it again. But these are all these videos for New Mexico Recovers are available on our YouTube channel, the Pivotal YouTube channel. There is a specific playlist for it. I'll just drop it right back in the chat again. So this will actually be recorded, or it is being recorded right now. So we'll make this available probably within 24 hours, if not 2 days. So it gets up pretty quickly in terms of putting the production up pretty. Yeah. And so, but yeah, does anyone else have any other questions, or for Marisol or for Sarah?
I can go on about federal reporting too. It's so important. I think everything is so important. Yeah, but like maintaining those federal relationships year to year to year and getting all those reports in, that's important as well. And the follow-up budget afterwards. That's okay. You don't need to
When
hear
did
about that.
y'all get your first federal grant?
So the NEA has a record. You may or may not know that the National Institute of Flamenco lost all of our records before 2013 because we had a devastating fire that unfortunately demolished all of our records from before 2013. But the NEA has a record on their website of back to 2000 of grants that they have awarded, and we have awards all the way, I mean, as far as I know, back to like 2001-ish, but could be before that. I'm I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Um,
And at that time, yeah, I mean, smaller grants from the NEA
Smaller.
but yeah, and then continuing, I would say also just continuing those relationships, trying to make friends. Sarah always says making friends.
They're
Make
wonderful
friends.
people. Wonderful people work in government agencies. Make friends with them. They're very nice.
Making friends and writing, asking questions. That's always good.
How do you feel? So has your federal granting and how much has your federal granting increased over the like last few years or so? Because I know with the recovery those were also federal funds. So was there like a steep increase? Is that a slow, steady increase?
Steep increase if you consider federal also relief funds. I think in our last we received $75,000 for this last year for this festival that's going to be presented this year, and the maximum that you can receive from the NEA is $100,000. So and I think also for an arts work program. So we've continued to grow in that capacity, and then with SVOG and with CARES funding that was distributed through NEA significantly, like manyfold.
I did drop in the chat so we did a video on a webinar on SVOG last year.
I've never heard anybody call it SVOG before. I've only heard SVOG. This is like a new SVOG. That's a thing.
SVOG. I always used to call it like chartered venues. That's what I always knew it as. But I was like, I heard somebody say SVOG. I was like, oh, interesting. So, but yeah, if you want a reference for that, I'm not sure if anyone applied for that, but I know some people in the audience came to that webinar. But I also and what I do know resulting from that is not a lot of people actually applied for that funding piece because I think it was very complicated. So I know your financial person Jerry is not here, but if you can talk to like how that was for y'all in terms of applying for that relief, that would be a little bit helpful for our audience.
So SVOG was all based on percentage of income lost due to the pandemic. So really being able to justify the amount of money that you made in 2019 pre-pandemic, and then the amount of money that you were able, and how that the loss of affected your programming in 2020 and 2021, and if you were had, depending on the percentage of that you've lost in your earning capacity due to the pandemic, then you could receive up to 40% of your revenue from the lost revenue. And so for us, it was, again, going back to differentiation of a lot of arts nonprofits don't have the capacity, and I feel for them, and I want to say that I know I've been in your shoes if you are from an arts nonprofit, and I'm still in your shoes, and as far as arts nonprofit, having to wear too many hats, so much of the time. But we were fortunate in that we did have, we were able to piece together and to pull that reporting that could clearly demonstrate what our lost revenue. And so with that, then really the SVOG was all about just being able to provide the financial statements. It was really providing financial statements, providing contracts with theaters, providing evidence of what kind of venues you work in, really support to show who you pay, where your money is going. And so there was very little narrative in SVOG, almost no narrative. There was
the numbers.
It was all
budget, no budget
statements.
narrative.
It was
project.
almost all financial statements, a lot of marketing material. You had to be able to provide a lot of marketing material for all of the work that you've done. Basically, just evidence to support what it is that you said that you've done, and your track record. And if you could if you could prove that, then you were. I think that it was most people, organizations that could do that were awarded. You probably know more about that than I do, Robert, but and because of the nature of our nonprofit, our arts nonprofit, we are kind of 75% earned income, 25% contributed income. So we're like, so as an arts nonprofit, because we rely so heavily, or we're trying to shift that dynamic, and now that has shifted, especially right now because of recovery money and all of this kind of thing in the last couple of years, where we now receive more grant money, more contributed in money, more than earned revenue. But historically, so like in a year like 2019, where we had much higher earned income, and what SVOG was looking at was earned income.
Over
So
400 performances in a year. Think about this. Thousands of flamenco classes every year, but 400, that's more than the days in the year. That's how many flamenco performances we usually
yeah.
do.
And the pandemic, the pandemic affected every industry. So I don't want to say, but performing arts and performing arts organizations and theaters and stuff,
And percussive dance forms,
we were
percussive art forms.
shuttered. So it was a blessing for our organization to be able to receive that money.
Thanks both of you for answering that question, just walking through like what happened with y'all too. And I know it's like 3:58. So is there I guess one thing I just want to ask you both is like, so what is one closing like thought or recommendation you would make for our audience before we get going today? Other than make friends with your government.
Make friends and light a candle. Those are good takeaways from today. Assemble your Avengers.
Got it.
I don't know. Good luck. That's it. That's all I can think of.
Awesome. Well, Marisol and Sarah, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you so much for presenting and for closing out our series on New Mexico Recovers, and to everyone who's stuck with us throughout this entire series in September. Really appreciate y'all joining us today. Like I said before, the video will be available on our YouTube channel probably within a day. And then we'll make sure to send an email out with the follow-up with the link to make sure folks get it. But if you have any questions about like any recovery processes, especially, you're welcome to email me. I'm just going to leave my email, if I can spell pivotal, there we go, in the chat. and ask any questions about like any upcoming trainings that are coming up for us, or webinars that we're about to host on the grant seeking landscape.
I did think of one thing, Robert, when you were talking about that, is that, like when I've served on different grant panels like NEA and different things like that, and that I realized that based on where we are working and where we live and where we do our programming, is that we're in geographical areas that are so isolated from a lot of different types. And so the work that we're doing just in and of itself, and being in the geographical place that we are, in the communities that we are, where we have so many things that are like so incredible about it, but there's merit in that just because we have access to fewer resources, I think, in general. And so I think that really having an opportunity, when we do have opportunities as people that live here and work here in New Mexico, to really just be able to shout out about the work that we're doing here. And funders need to be able to send money our way, because we're really getting a small percentage, I think, of the pie, in what I've seen and when I've served on panels that are from other parts of the US. So I think that, I would just encourage people to continue to look for things, just keep scratching for where is their money, because I think that when you are able to write proposals, I think that hopefully the work that we're doing here is seen as valuable. And, because there's not a lot of representation, I think, from our neck of the woods in places where I've seen when we've been writing grants.
Those are really great words to close by. I really appreciate that, Marisol. Thank you so much. And for those of you, if you want to keep up with Pivotal New Mexico, make sure that you subscribe to our email. You can find that at pivotalnm.org. And until then, though, we wish everyone a really great rest of your Wednesday. Thank you, Marisol and Sarah, again. And we'll see you all very soon. Take care, y'all. Have a good
Thank
rest of your
you.
day.